Hi everyone. In this video, I'd like to just give a brief introduction to the idea and the practice of Yoga Nidra. So first of all, let's just look at those two words. Yoga Nidra, what do they mean? Nidra, first of all, means literally sleep. Now, it's important here to differentiate between sleep and dream. In the yoga system of philosophy, as well as Vedanta, sleep and dream are two quite different and distinct states of mind. So Nidra here means sleep. If you want to use modern scientific terminology, you could say deep, dreamless, non-REM sleep, which is characterized on an electroencephalogram by the production of delta waves, delta brain waves, so that deep dreamless sleep, and then yoga together with that. So Yoga Nidra, what does that mean? Well, that is debatable, but here it means, in my understanding, consciously aware deep dreamless sleep. So that state in which the ordinary person is unconscious, is not aware of the experience, bringing the conscious awareness into that experience of Nidra. So therefore Yoga Nidra. Interesting to think about it in that context, because when you look at yoga, you can find that really in pretty well all of the practices of yoga, what you're doing, what the practitioner is doing, is bringing the conscious awareness, that mindful awareness, into different experiences in different ways. Right? It's all application of mindful awareness. So here we have the application of mindful awareness in the state of deep, dreamless sleep. Okay. So then, why would you do that? What's the purpose of Yoga Nidra? Well, as for pretty much everything in the practice of yoga, Yoga Nidra is given as a means for stabilizing the mind so that the mind can become one-pointed and enter into deep meditation. So in a sense, it's another tool given to the practitioner to help you to experience deeper meditations and finally samadhi, that one-pointed flow of your mind in meditation. Right? So it's given as a means to stabilize the mind. Actually, in the sutra, it's chapter 1, sutra 38, Patanjali gives two methods, two means called alambanas. Alambana means a handle or something for your mind to hold on to. So in that sutra, one is dream and the other one is sleep. So giving those experiences to your mind, for your mind to become one-pointed on those experiences, and thereby to become stable and undisturbed, and to have the capacity then to enter deep meditation. So Yoga Nidra is really given as a preparation and a means towards deep meditation. Having said that, Yoga Nidra itself, the experience itself, has many other beautiful facets and many other purposes, you could say side purposes as well. So just in terms of experiencing a very, very deep level of relaxation, and also that experience of deep dreamless sleep itself, when the conscious awareness is brought into that experience, it's really a very beautiful, very enjoyable experience. So just that itself is very encouraging for the practitioner. And so then also moving up, progressing up towards the state and experience of Yoga Nidra, there are many different practices given as stepping stones, if you will, as stages of practice leading you up to being prepared to lead your mind into deep dreamless sleep. So these, in the tradition of my master Swami Veda and his master Swami Rama, you can actually find them all in the book titled Path of Fire and Light, Volume 2, there a little bit towards the back of the book, there's a section on Yoga Nidra where, in very brief, Swami Rama outlines all of these practices, all of these steps. And so they are, in brief, first to deal with the grosser levels of tension, often unconscious tension held in the physical body. You have the tension relaxation practice, then you have systematic relaxation, then 31 and 61 point visualizations. After that, the practice called sweeping breath, and sometimes called Shittalikarana, and then finally the technique of Yoga Nidra, of leading the mind's awareness progressively from wakefulness to dream and finally into deep dreamless sleep. So all of these practices are means and stepping stones towards the practice and the state of Yoga Nidra, but also on their own, each one is a very useful and very beautiful practice by itself. And each one has layers and levels of significance. So I very much encourage anyone to practice them who wishes to practice them. But of course, learning from a book is fine, but it's always best, if you really want to practice these things, to find someone who is qualified, who's well experienced in the practice and in the tradition, to guide you step by step in these practices. And then for the final practice of Yoga Nidra itself, it's really very helpful, if not necessary, to really have a guide to help you to go into that experience. So this whole progression of practices of different steps are practiced in Shavasana, in the corpse posture, and that's particularly helpful to practice after your physical practices. So if you're doing physical yoga practices or other forms of physical meditative practices, then doing your Shavasana practices leading up towards Yoga Nidra afterwards is a very, very good time to do it. So now a few tips for these subtle body practices. First of all, one thing that happens very often to people when they're starting out and as they're progressing through is they get so relaxed they fall asleep. Okay, so in the beginning, early on, not really something to worry about too much. If you're falling asleep again and again, probably means that you are holding some deep exhaustion in your body and in your mind, that you're now giving yourself a chance to release and to really rest very deeply in a way that perhaps you didn't do for a long time. So if you're falling asleep in the beginning, don't worry too much about it. Allow yourself to do it, but then you don't want to form that into a habit. So what you want to be careful of here is giving your mind a habit that I'm doing this practice and I'm going to fall asleep. Once that becomes a habit, it becomes difficult to come out of. So what you can do after some time, when you feel that I'm well rested, I'm ready to do this, I don't want to make a habit, I don't want to fall asleep, is you can, at the beginning of your practice, just ask your mind, hey mind, I'm going to do this practice. I'm going to lie here for however long, depending on the stages that I'm going through, 15 minutes, 20 minutes, 30 minutes, 1 hour perhaps, more than 1 hour perhaps. And mind, please do not fall asleep. I will not fall asleep during this practice. Make that sankalpa, make that resolve, and then begin your practice. And over time, as you make that resolve again and again, and go deeper into relaxation and carry your conscious awareness into that experience without losing yourself, without becoming unconscious and falling asleep, then the more you'll develop that capacity, that sankalpa, to remain aware of the experience. Now, Of course, in the practice of Yoga Nidra itself, once you've gone through all of the steps and stages of preparation, then it is actually a practice of going into sleep. I hesitate to use the phrase falling asleep. In my mind, the phrase falling asleep somehow carries with it a sense of dropping the conscious awareness falling away. So you really are going into first the dream state and then the deep, dreamless sleep state, but the only difference is you're carrying your conscious awareness with you into that experience. So also don't develop the sankalpa in your mind that I will not go into sleep too strongly, because ultimately, finally in Yoga Nidra, you are going to go into sleep. You just won't drop your awareness during the experience, right? So you can make the sankalpa very fine and specific in your mind. I will not lose my awareness. I will not drop my awareness and lose myself in this experience. I will remain aware of myself for my entire practice. Okay, so very useful to do that and to make that habit of your mind. So another small tip, it can be very helpful to do these practices not necessarily in your bed where you sleep at night. Your mind and body very often have a habit related to that space, and you can really discover, it's very interesting, that different spaces have different habits for your body and mind, and when you enter that space, your body and mind will go into a certain mode. So very useful if you have a certain space for your meditation every day, where you go every day at the same time to that space. It can be a very powerful way to get into meditation, because that space is for that mode of being. But in this case, if you go and lie down in your bed where you sleep at night and always just fall asleep and lose your awareness, then you try to practice Yoga Nidra, it may not work so well. So what you might find better is make a small space somewhere next to your meditation seat or where you're practicing your physical practices. Lie down, make sure it's warm enough. Make sure it's relatively comfortable and soft, but not so soft that your spine is bending and you're sagging into it. Cover yourself with a light shawl. Make sure that you stay warm enough, because you can get cold. You'll be lying still for as long as you're going to be there, and definitely give your body the support that you need as well. So if you need support under your knees to help take pressure off your lower back, if you need support for your head and the back of your neck, give yourself those things so that your body is really able to relax very deeply without any problems. And you will discover over time the support that your body needs. So just be ready to give yourself that. So then finally, a few words about Yoga Nidra and neuroscience. So interestingly, this is one of the particularly interesting states and practices within the field of neuroscience of meditation. That's a field that is growing rapidly nowadays. And the reason that this Yoga Nidra is such an interesting experience and practice of yoga within that field is that it's quite easily demonstrated. It can be demonstrated using modern neuroscience equipment, specifically in electroencephalogram. So if you connect the sleeper, the practitioner, to the electroencephalogram, measure their brain waves, when someone goes into deep dreamless sleep, they should start producing delta waves, a very low frequency brainwave, characteristic of that deep dreamless sleep state. And then if the practitioner is able to remain aware of themselves and their surroundings, demonstrate that, then it was clearly a demonstration and an experience of Yoga Nidra. So that's something which is very useful presently for the modern neuroscience of meditation. Apart from Yoga Nidra, it's a very beautiful and interesting growing field, but still, in many senses, still very much in the data gathering phase. So then, what does just a couple of final points for the practitioners who are experimenting, practicing, attempting to come to the experience of Yoga Nidra through their practice step by step. So what does the Yoga Sutras have to say about the actual experience of Yoga Nidra itself? Well, in the translation and commentary by my master Swami Veda, the experience is described as the experience of conscious deep sleep is described as the mind becoming absorbed on a single cognition, and that cognition is the cognition of negation. From my experience, I like to term it as something like the experience of not. A single cognition, interestingly. So there is the question, which is also addressed in Swami Veda's commentary on the Yoga Sutras. Then if this is the mind becoming absorbed on a single cognition unit, isn't that the state of samadhi? Wouldn't that be equivalent, synonymous with the state of samadhi? Wouldn't this be one of the levels of samadhi? And Swami Veda there explains that the difference really here between Yoga Nidra and samadhi is, there is a difference. It's a very small one. The difference is that in samadhi, the mind's awareness is flowing on the single cognition of a sattvic vritti, a sattvic experience. So that starts from slightly grosser levels of reality within the scheme of reality given by Sankhya philosophy, which is taken together, needs to be taken together with yoga philosophy in the Yoga Sutras, because so many of the terms in Sankhya philosophy are also used in yoga and in the Yoga Sutras. So within that scheme of the manifestation of the universe in Sankhya philosophy, the grosser, more devoluted from Prakriti manifestations are the instruments used as a cognition in the earlier states of samadhi, the lower states of that samprajñāta samadhi, the samadhi of the mind field, the samadhi with an object. And then as the experience develops, that object becomes a more and more sattvic and more subtle object. Here the object is not pure tamas, but absolutely dominated by tamas. So therefore it is not an experience of samadhi. It is an experience of one-pointed awareness, and therefore it is an experience of some stability of the mind field, which I guess is why it's given by Patanjali to the practitioners as a means of stabilizing the mind field, to prepare the mind field for the experience of deep meditation and samadhi, right? However, the experience of Yoga Nidra itself is not yet samadhi, although very close, right? It's absorption on a single cognition which is dominated by tamas, dominated by darkness. And samadhi is similarly a single cognition, mind field absorbed in a single cognition which is dominated by sattva and then increasingly and increasingly sattvic as the meditation and experience deepens and deepens. So what you're looking for in the experience of Yoga Nidra is that experience of the state, conscious, aware experience of the state of deep, dreamless sleep, which is the experience of the cognition of negation, which is really also described by Vyasa in the Yoga Sutras as being really an extremely enjoyable experience. It really is an experience of absolute stillness, and a kind of stillness that you want to remain in and you don't want to come out of because it's so enjoyable. But having said that, as much as it is a very enjoyable experience that you don't want to come out of, the advice was given by my Master Swami Rama, that practitioners, especially those who are not under the direct guidance of an expert, practitioners should try to not stay in that state of Yoga Nidra itself for more than about 10 minutes. So that's an interesting caution given by one of the masters of the tradition. And I've been asked, why is that, a number of times, and I have just a very small understanding based on what I've read from some of the writings of Swami Veda, which is that that experience is very attractive and a very beautiful experience, and the mind can be drawn into such a habit of going into that experience that it can potentially become an obstacle in the progression of one's meditation and in the progression of one's, finally, at the higher levels of meditation, in the progression of one's samadhi from the lower states to the middle states, etc. So therefore, Swami Rama had advised, go into the experience, prepare yourself, obviously, under the guidance of an expert, go into the experience, but try not to give your mind too strong a habit of going into that experience by staying there for only 10 minutes and then coming out. So that's the advice, especially for anyone who's practicing not under the direct guidance of really a qualified master. So very good advice. And one final point before I finish here. So this is also one of those practices where you can start to experience over a period of time, especially if you're practicing over years and years, start to experience what different levels of mastery of a practice really means. So this is probably a subject for an entire another video. Swami Veda had given a category of different levels of mastery in practice, which can be applied to meditation, to Yoga Nidra, and to a lot of different experiences and practices. But here in Yoga Nidra, let's just talk about that for a moment. I won't go through all the categories, but the purpose of bringing this up is that you will probably find in the beginning, if you want to go through all the preparatory practices, that's tension relaxation, systematic relaxation, 61-point Shitalikarana, it will take a long period of time. It will probably take about 1.5 hours to go through all of those practices in one sitting. Having said that, it's actually particularly useful to do a session of joints and glands movements before you lie down for your 1.5 hour or 2 hour practice, because the body can become quite painful in lying absolutely still for such a long period of time, especially when you've got unconscious energetic tensions in the joints of your body. So joints and glands is a practice to help you to release those tensions before you lie down, and thereby to become more comfortable, especially in the earlier stages of your practice. So I'll do another video sometime on joints and glands, a guided practice of that one. So in the beginning, what's often the most useful approach is to take those different practices piece by piece and practice each one separately. So give yourself a specific amount of time, understand how long you'll need for each one, and then practice that one by itself, especially if you don't have 1.5 hours to lie down and do your full preparatory practices for Yoga Nidra every day. Then take one piece of the practice, take it in a progression, practice that one piece every day, day after day, and you will get more and more and more proficient at going through that practice, maintaining your conscious awareness as you go through that practice. And then once you feel you've attained a certain level of proficiency in that practice, then move on to the next piece. Practice that piece every day for weeks and months. Move on to the next piece, etc. So that you've practiced each piece to the point where you're proficient in it over weeks and months, so that you're very familiar with bringing yourself to the conclusion and the experience of that practice before moving on to the next practice. And then at some stage, bring them all together. Try to practice them all together. And as you do that day after day and month after month and year after year, really, if you're practicing over years every day, then what you'll start to find is that you're able to go through those practices and achieve the same depth of experience of relaxation in less time. Right? So where it once took you perhaps 1.5 hours to go through all of the preparatory practices up to the point of entering into Yoga Nidra, after a number of years it will take you not 1.5 hours but 1 hour. And then after some more time, 45 minutes, and then 40 minutes, and then 30 minutes. So that doesn't mean that you're rushing through the practices. It doesn't mean that you're rushing through and doing them superficially, but it means that you've become so accustomed to the experience that those practices lead you into that you're able to then go through the same sequence, come to that experience in a little bit less time. So that can be helpful and encouraging to know that the more you practice, the more you deepen your familiarity with that experience, the easier it becomes to come to that same experience again. Right? And really that progression of practices leading up to the state of Yoga Nidra itself is a progression that is designed to help you, to help the practitioner to slowly, gradually release themselves from that physical body-bound awareness that most of us are in most of the time, to let go of that awareness and that holding the physical body with tension, and allow your awareness and your identification with yourself to come to subtler and subtler layers. So to become aware of your subtle body, to become aware of those different layers of yourself that are deeper than the physical body. Okay, so those practices are beautiful in themselves and ultimately leading you to that state of Yoga Nidra, and so enjoy them. So that's all that there will be for this video today. Hope to make another video perhaps, or another series of audios where there is the basic guidance for all of these practices given up to the technique of Yoga Nidra itself. So you can check for those audios on the website digitalpilgrim.org, and enjoy your practice. Wish you a few moments of absolute beautiful stillness. Thanks very much, and see you next time.